just like total Big Star fanatics from like day one, but like we'd already made like a record, and we're, I think, in the middle of making or getting ready to make our first major label record when we got turned on to Big Star, because people were like, "Oh, you guys sound so much like Big Star, you have to hear them." And I worked at a record store, and this record store manager of mine heard our first Posey's record, this record called Failure, this dinky pop record we did as like teenagers in Bellingham, Washington, and he said, "Wow, if you guys are like this and you like bands like Squeeze and XTC and the Beatles, you're gonna love this." And he went over to the vinyl section, because they, and bought this reissue of Radio City on vinyl for me. And he said, "Go home and put on September Girls," and I did. And I swear I'd heard it before, and maybe I'd heard, the Bangles version somewhere. I don't think I did. I just think it just sounded so good, and we just started listening to it at that point. And I think two of the guys in our bands also had a CD. Was it Rick and Mike who had?
Yeah, again, 75% of our band worked in record stores, and 100% of them were, confronted pretty quickly on by employees in the know who said, "Wow, if this is what you guys are into, this kind of harmony-laden, glorious, chimey kind of pop, probably your life will not be complete without hearing these records." And
Totally.
that's exactly how it felt, real completion of many things hearing these records for the first time.
And Tommy, for you, I know you probably came to it, at a certain, well, not contemporary, obviously, because you're younger, but when did you hear it? And sort of for you, I mean, how did it sort of strike you, kind of?
Well, it's funny because Chris was just talking about, I remember hearing When My Baby's Beside Me on the radio in D.C., which would have been right around that time.
Right.
And thinking, this is great, what is it? And it's a Big Star, and I would read about people talking about them, but it was so elusive because you couldn't really, I mean, I did hear it on the radio once, but couldn't find these records. It wasn't until sort of the late 70s that, someone gave me a cassette with all the 3 records on it, and, someone said, "You should, maybe cover one of these songs. This guy kind of sounds like you in a way." And anyway, so that was just opened up, floodgates. But I couldn't sing as high as Alex, so I couldn't cover their songs.
we were talking musically about the sound of the records, John Fry, and maybe the harmonies and everything. But as I remember that period, there was another quality to the music that really drew me in, and it was that I felt like these guys weren't lying to me. That there was a lot of stuff. I mean, we know Spinal Tap. It was kind of a Spinal Tap era, or maybe Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. I mean, it's fairly incomprehensible things, and there would be a lot of records where they're saying things that just were not true, and you knew they weren't true, but they're just kind of being boastful or whatever. And these records seemed like they were truthful and honest, and people were writing about their experiences. Something like 13 or El Goodo. I mean, it seemed like it was for real, and it really stood out at that time. A lot of records were very false. So that's what I think.
And obviously that's why sort of people connected at the time and have continued. So just moving on to kind of Radio City, with Chris leaving the band and you guys forging on as a 3-piece, and then obviously Andy left, but working on that record, and John, you can chime in too. How did that? Now it's almost like a different band in a way, because there's sort of, it's like a table without one leg, but then it became a different thing. Talk a little bit, Andy, just in terms of, that second record is equally amazing, but it's, a different band in a sense.
Yeah, well, I guess it's obviously more of a Alex band, but it also is more sort of a just normal progression of where are things going to go now. You're not going to continue doing the same stuff. You're going to be looking for new sounds and different things, and even in the stuff you write, looking for kind of different ideas and stuff. And so I don't think that's particularly surprising, but it's kind of like you got your feet under you. We sort of had a pretty good idea how the studio worked by this point, and we had a pretty good idea of sort of basically what we could do and who we were, and so now, okay, well, let's play around with that and see where we can go with it. And so an awful lot on that Radio City LP was just experimentation and trying different stuff, and like, well, there was that one song, what was it, Daisy Glaze, that we basically just wrote in the studio. Let's just set up and play and see what happens. 3 or 4 different sessions, and by the time we got through the 4th, we had a song. It was kind of a weird song, and he had all these odd different pieces that had kind of been stitched together, but you know, it worked. And somebody thought of a crazy enough name for it, so we put it on the
There
LP.
was we played that song live once, and I think Alex said a song by George Friedrich Chilton.
And of course,
George Friedrich.
and of course, we're compressing the history a little
Grosser
bit.
Concerti, number or something like that.
And the blessed key of A minor.
We're compressing the history a little bit because Big Star sort of, after the first record and Chris left and the band kind of floundered for a while, or a short period, looked like they were breaking up, and got back together anyway. And the Rock Writers Convention story, you probably all know that. But John, heading into, so the second record is released and the distribution problems with Stax are worsening, and it, again, critical praise but not a lot of sales, and then it sort of shifts into pretty important period for Alex, and now it's just Alex and Jody in terms of making Big Star third. Were you, after the first 2 records, John, did it seem obvious that, you know, you were going to continue, or, you know, that Alex and or maybe Jody, you can speak to it as well, that, you know, that Big Star or this band or the 2 of you were going to continue, or did it kind of, how did it feel at that point, you know, sort of after the first 2 records? John?
Go ahead, John.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Well, you know, Chris pointed out something, that the records are honest and they're reflective of the times and reflective of everything that's going on. I mean, you know, it's even the geography. When we started #1 record, we were out in a neighborhood of Memphis where basically nothing was going on. You know, there's no way to get in trouble. Then we moved to Midtown, and Memphis was very late in allowing bars to sell alcohol, but all the bars were in Midtown. You know, we had the roughest place next door to us, Trader Dick's. That's where everybody would go after the others closed. They'd go there, drink more, and fight. And you know, so and the other thing that's going on in the background is, you know, Stax is looking great up to a certain point. Then they make this deal with Columbia that Al Bell made personally with Clive Davis, and then right after that, Clive is ousted. And, you know, it never worked for Stax, it never worked for us. I thought it was going to be the greatest thing in the world. And, you know, by the time we were putting Radio City out, you could almost see the handwriting on the wall in terms of Stax. And then by the time we were recording Sister Lovers Third, the Memphis music scene was in pieces on the ground. I mean, Stax was closed. We didn't have a distributor, and so there are a lot of things going on in the background that, and in people's personal lives that are reflected, and they're all honest records, and they're all, you know, expressing the life experiences of the songwriters. And you know, we took Sister Lovers Third to every major. Jim Dickinson produced that. We've been having entirely too much death around Memphis lately. You know, Jim, and then Willie Mitchell, Jay Retard, now this. But that's kind of an aside. But we took Sister Lovers Third to every major record company, and as Jody puts it, none of them would touch it. It was like it was radioactive. Lenny Warnaker told Jim Dickinson, "Jim, this music disturbs me deeply."
And it is, without getting too much into it, it is a reflection of that period in Alex's life and his relationship with Lisa Aldridge. And you know, the sort of chaos that was sort of slowly enveloping Memphis and Memphis music and probably Alex's life up to a point. And again, Big Star Third, Sister Lovers didn't come out for a number of years. And that was kind of, in some ways, the end of that period. You hear Big Star Third, you hear sort of Alex becoming, in some ways, the Alex that we've known really in the last, you know, 35 years. Chris?
I would actually like to argue a little bit.
Okay.
I have I guess, a revisionary or musicology. When I listen to that record today, when I listen to Big Star Third, and really when I did then, I think it is very well arranged,